Harvest the Stella in your life. Celebration and game review. Silly, relatable, honest, and unapologetically me. Introduction. Farm games, the appeal of an easy and bountiful life. For physical wounds, we have bandages, and for emotional ones, we have literature. For me, we have video games. In the past, farming games were a comfortable fantasy that made realistic goals and dreams simple realities with little consequence or effort required. JRPGs let me be someone else. My favorites were always the ones that let me be me, all in a world distant from our own, and with an odd, bubbling cast hell-bent on seizing the day beside you. There is no worry of betrayal, failure, or not being liked. There's no fear built upon the roots of social anxiety, no expectation. Time and effort bar entry and success. It's a perfect genre for a simulated vacation, which, funny enough, I haven't been able to take, so it's doubly important. And all that's to preface with, games, especially JRPG farm sims, are my go-to stress relief. And to continue with the blunted truth, I hit the survival button pretty hard, had the cyclical rotation of negative emotions until COVID of all things cracked my shell, and poured light in the oddest of ways down my throat like it was fast-acting medicine. I got over the vid and was grateful just to not be in pain, an immediate shock as it was hard to feel much at the time, to be happy during the holidays when I was distant from loved ones, angry at decisions I made and circumstances of the world, and depressed over stark realities and truths surrounding humanity. What I heard and saw was not always pleasant, but I had forgotten all the great people, fantastic work, and inevitable turning of the seasons I had both around me and awaiting me. It was a momentary lapse that accumulated over many hardships in time and was sundered with a bit of Christmas magic and cheer. A little light making out the little things, and a game called Harvestella, a game that was more than an escape for me. The 2020 Game of the Year, excluding Elden Ring. If it's Square's year, then Harvestella is the winning representative. But to return to the tracks, shift focus, and answer the question, what am I getting myself into? We'll press on. Harvestella is a hidden gem, heard by everyone but hardly appreciated the scale I'd expect and desire. To say it and spit it, it'd be my game of the year if Elden Ring wasn't abruptly sitting there all smug-like. But second place is worth something, and I'm in shock that it's so inadequately rewarded for its stellar performance. The last few years have been rough on us all, including myself, and a question has perverted my mind for so long. Call it brainworms, teenage nihilism. I'm a bit too old for that, but oh well. Or the influence of a cruel world, but I ask and wonder, does humanity, do we deserve to exist? It's a question rooted in the answer. And it's as obvious as obscured depending on the circumstance, context, and conversation, all prompted by Harvestella in extraordinary fashion. So no, it's not my game of the year technically, but it holds firmly the best narrative of the year for killing the young cynic in me, or at least mortally wounding the little bugger. This is an authentic Square experience, with all the J and all the A and the RPG they could muster in classic Square fashion. The foundation is given flavor by the farming systems, and the final dish is as colorful and delicious as the in-game food looks.
So good and tasty?
It harbors a story about the world beneath their feet, one unabashedly badass in its creationism and mythos, that honestly mimics the last story and some of its bold ideas, all while putting on full display the phenomenal character designs, environments, and robust as hell 70 songs oozing pure quality, and food so pretty you're definitely getting hungry just looking at it, all along with several narratives I desperately needed. Discovered the very truth of the world itself. To be honest, the weight of this video is giving me flashbacks to the last story, not only due to the similarities, little personal cognitive associations, and the absolute impossibility I feel when trying to grasp the weight of its importance while maintaining both honesty and integrity. Call it ambitious to a fault too, but earnestly, I feel unworthy of capturing such majesty. especially because there's so much emotional weight behind my praise. To have feelings is harder than to have competency, and hopefully one will bleed through bloodier than the other and convey a proper message. Because games are impactful, meaningful, and essential to our conception of the world, or at least mine. The best titles are those that I can call upon that grab that feeling that one's formative years will never truly end, that there's more to discover and absorb. And in epic fashion, I credit this award to Harvestella. It proclaims an excellent message all deserve to receive, and one that broke the cynic in me, if only temporarily, a feat I will not ignore till death do us part. With careful build-up, it hides that care and detail, relying on other vital features to capture its audience. For its slow start, it depends on hooking all who take a moment to simply listen and look at the vistas equally painted and played. From the character designs to luminescent background and the phenomenal OST that demands an uproar over its limited availability. Seriously, why is this only available in Japan and like the Apple Store? And while the childlike awe never expires from witnessing either, the gameplay kicks in after the initial slow start and offers a unique action experience apart from modern competitors. In an older, more traditional fashion, it feels almost akin to an MMO's design in how it demands engagement from the audience. It's a welcome display in the single-player ARPG field due to its difference. It focuses on concepts away from character capability without breaks, gives my aching hand a rest, and offers something alluring among the many modern carpal tunnel kings and queens. It's akin to Xenoblade in that subtle transformation where it unveils itself to be unhinged but competent in its revelations. Going from a quiet and slow discovery of a new world to the ever-expanding and groundbreaking revelation of twists and secrets back to back to back until finally the game has felt one final boss fight away for several bosses straight, and the excitement has only grown in magnitude instead of waned, and the scope of the final bout feels genuine as epic, in a manner so rare amongst the god-defying JRPGs that I dare say it's something special. The means of production and progression. Take your time. The only downside is Harvestella doesn't sell itself conventionally, despite being marketed as a robust farm sim. Instead, this title focuses on using the auxiliary genre to diversify its J&A RPG experience. But bluntly, it's not especially special in the farming department, as that's not the focus. It's a complementary system doomed to disappoint Harvest Moon veterans. That isn't to say there's nothing new or exciting in the farming features, or that there's no refinement of industry staples. I only meant to temper expectations and turn eyes towards what matters. The core gameplay is driven by combat and the means of progression, or the auxiliary systems present. It's cohesive by nature. Almost all of the systems brought over to support the farming label contribute to monetary progression, which is the primary component for increasing offensive capabilities. To jump right in, farming is necessary to proceed. Almost all prep and character progression occurs through it. To perform and succeed, the player must participate. Preparation, processing, and preservation all facilitate player growth. It's an alternative for grinding in the traditional or even modern format. There's instead a focus on profiteering for progression's sake, through farming in its many systems. I prefer it to wading through monster corpses and relying on EXP as the only resource for growth. Farming. It's a preferable and at times intricate alternative to smacking monsters. Farming is shallow to start and eventually a simple, concise, and automated process that's as rewarding as much as it is necessary. Instead of being a nuisance, it's an evolutionary experience that improves itself and all other systems complementary. So it gets progressively easier to accumulate money, and after the novelty wears, the automation arrives and absolves any issue of repetition. Overall, it's enjoyable and effective, designed to be to the point. The main appeal comes through the poorly explained but entertaining fairies. They appear out of nowhere very early on and provide character to make up for their purpose as a plot hole filler as much maker. They're a fun mechanical addition that I'll excuse their lack of narrative cohesion due to their contribution to the novelty and farming systems. The fairies, upon arrival, have some fanfare and contribute by offering little upgrades to existing systems. For example, of the 3 tools the player has, the hoe, the watering can, and the hammer, each fairy offers a unique ability in the form of watering a greater area, gathering a greater area, upgrading the hammer to smash giant boulders, and many other additions should the player put in some effort. This is because fairies have a quest book associated with each fairy and their complementary season, which is then tied to a sea slite and its location and a town or community. It's reasonably cohesive in terms of game design and theming, despite the narrative complaints I have. This translates to a focus on unlocks based in an area, such as Shatola contributing to the crops, produce, and quests in that area, upgrading and unlocking this charming little blue gal's abilities. This includes new biomes for farming and further upgrades like automated sprinklers. Biomes are also a unique topic. While a more traditional or common genre idea, the biomes add a lot of depth. There's a water and cave biome that operates year-round except during winter. Both biomes don't require watering and are simple plant and pluck. They provide access to water crops and dry crops, such as sugarcane or curry, greatly expanding profits and production. They're a fun and visually distinct element I appreciated, and the consistent theme of simple automation is appreciated. Cooking and all its vices, but summarized swiftly. To continue, I'll note the game does have lovely visuals for food, the best being for products of cooking. I'll avoid boring y'all with the details, but in some, there's crops, processing, tools, and devices, managing cattle, fishing, and cooking. Gathering all the ingredients takes time, preparation, and conscious effort, and there's several rewards for turning in every desk to each and every inn. I could go in further depth, but I did, and ended up droning on for too long. If you're still curious, you could always check out the footage on my side channel, Couch Raws. Something, shameless plug, but seriously, the video is long enough. I will note, however, that the fishing in this game has a very specific pool. Angling isn't complex or unique, but the camera and scenery do stick out. The angle, the panning, into a fixed frame, putting the hand-picked bright spots and beautiful vistas on display, while the player patiently waits a tug on the rod. It's such a fucking vibe. All of this holds importance because farming profits contribute towards smithy upgrades. Gathering and profiteering together enable purchasing improvements for the player and party. It's pretty dull on paper, but the reasons behind it are tight, and I prefer the excuse to farm rather than more monster grinding. This is further reinforced due to unique systems in combat, but we'll get there when we get there. In sum, it's fun, tight, and effective. What feels shallow at the start is concise and purposeful with time investment. They focus on simple and enjoyable classic systems that bleed into automation before they wear out, and fun progression entirely, so I thankfully don't have to sit and grind my way through mobs for hours because of needless and boring padding. Instead, we have a practical but different way to progress stats and combat that's a robust additional flavor to the traditional JRPG format. Offline budget Final Fantasy XIV. Bro, trust me, it's good. Once the player funds their adventures and are prepped for a pounding, they'll go out and fight their way towards the inevitable time to kill the god boss fight Japan loves so dearly. Before we do so, I'll quickly break down the meat and potatoes of Harvestella's gameplay. To start, let's look into the moveset. There's a simple attack, potentially 3 active abilities to use per class, and a class swap function, and a single button tied to movement. Each ability has an independent cooldown, and class swapping also has a cooldown independent to each class, so it's possible to swap to one and immediately to another, but not back to the same. Furthermore, the movement ability can be held to sprint, or if the class has the function, can be tapped to step, which is effectively a dodge but without any apparent invincibility frames. And there's a little button to use an item from the inventory. I also, unfortunately but necessarily, must point y'all's eyes to the bottom left of our HUD. I won't bore you with the details. You already know health, and stamina acts as mana or energy for all combat and farming actions. It's the mofo digestion meter we gotta talk about. Basically, eating food fills your belly, of course, until you can't eat anymore. Stamina regenerates only when food is in the belly and faster based on how full you are, and food is an option for quick stamina and health regeneration. It's simple, but digestion is critical to combat flow and loops, so I had to do the YouTuber thing or explain even the simple things like UI, because digestion is a little visually obtuse. The charm of the system isn't in its mechanical depth, but in the variety of classes and party members to curate your playstyle. Classes are the selling point. The main pull and motif of every Square game is its job system. Supported by designs older than myself and the classic EXP and JP systems to progress character capability. Essentially, use the class to make it stronger, nothing outstanding, but still effective. The appeal is instead with its ludonarrative relationship between your classes and comrades. Classes are unlocked from your peers, minus the starting and few secret classes. And to progress past certain milestones, relationship milestones must alone be obtained. It's a sweet tie into themes surrounding community. It's a system encouraged because the best parts of classes are concealed by character quest, withholding those precious bond points from you. There's cross-class passives, unique passives to unlock, new abilities, upgrades, and a lot of little characteristics to uncover for each class. The class diversity is also solid. There's the standard Lancer, Rogue, more unique classes like the one with the pile driver, and the singing support Siren class, and my favorite, Gun. Some feature long channels and terrible backswings paired with the best damage, AoE, and control in the entire game. Others lack defensive options and stats, but have swift, high damage bursts to compete. There's even a support class built around a Siren aesthetic, which contrasts the typical cleric wonderfully. But each fulfill their fantasy wonderfully and have substantial differences from each other in role, playstyle, and character identity. It's just one of Square's strong suits. Class design is, and always will be, their thing, and it fucks pretty hard in Harvestella. And alongside stellar class design, another Square feel is obtained in how bosses are handled. Harvestella isn't your modern day action RPG with parries, perfect dodges, and combos out the wazoo. Instead, it focuses on positional and contextual prompts to drive engagement and direct combat flow. It will throw several warning indicators to promote movement and memorization. There will be instances where the player must attack the boss or die, and a few even feature unique mechanics that cannot be ignored. It all mixes up the formula enough to justify engagement despite the lack of modern interactions in Harvestella. It's a creative way to hold player attention and feel engaging throughout. The combination of these combat systems and level scaling work in tangent to consistently make each boss, each story-relevant combat encounter, tense without being excessively difficult. All enemies in the game have fixed levels except for bosses, and as long as the player is upgrading their gear in proportion to their level, they'll be capable of competency. Level scaling is a controversial component in RPGs because while it can enhance an experience, it can consistently harm it when done poorly. One of the primary appeals of the traditional RPG is that leveling is an accessibility feature. If the game's too hard, then time can be exchanged for an easier experience and vice versa. The player can play at a faster pace by skipping quests and encounters at a difficulty increase. Level scaling has the habit of creating walls that cannot be overcome by alternative measures, and can create a get good interaction that will severely harm engagement. And while personally, Harvestella was consistently difficult but never impossible, I do feel that accessibility should be designed into the game, and in a less patronizing manner than the difficulty option. Innate difficulty correction or player-driven difficulty by unique systems and mechanics is personally preferable. The main difficulty alternative is to mass-produce beverages, as they add no digestive, have no animation, are easy to mass-produce, and effectively create easy conditions for victory. If you've ever played Skyrim and need an entire feast in a millisecond just to heal, same idea. It's evident to me that difficulty was weighed on time investment and preparation in Harvestella, and that there was a drive in the team to create powerful and challenging boss fights, no matter the player's level. It establishes a phenomenal climax where every major encounter is genuinely difficult, or doesn't feel like a pushover because of over-preparation by the player. It gives credit to the player and still feels essential, never detracting from the story by ever being too easy. The boss design and class design are exceptional, and remind me of a particular other game. The popular and acclaimed Final Fantasy XIV comes to mind because of the multi-class freedom and the boss design. Both visually and mechanically feel similar, as if inspiration was directly taken from the successful older sibling. If I had to recommend a Final Fantasy XIV fan to a single-player offline alternative, Harvestella is a bit smaller in scale and budget, but absolutely scratched the itch. My only complaint is that it didn't continue growing in scale, but that'd require it to throw the plot out the window in favor of empowering a crystal-blessed hero, rather than saying something personally powerful. Breaks and ultimates. I need a break. The break mechanics feed into further class and party diversity and identity, while also providing additional depth, and thankfully cheese, into boss combat. The central theme of this game, if my underlevel asked to sell it, is boss encounters. The everyday encounter does lack interaction by design, sadly, but makes up for it when it counts. Anywho, the break feature was a system I hardly intentionally interacted with till the last 5 to 10 hours of the game, and only went out of my way to party optimize for the last 2 bosses. But to be fair, Emo and Estina were so powerful that they never had to leave the party beforehand. Regardless, it's the system behind damage types, which are split into elemental and physical types. For example, Crush and Earth can be the damage types for an attack, or even an entire class archetype, i.e. the mechanic with the pile driver is a Crush and Earth focused role. A boss can have up to 4 weaknesses, and after a certain amount of damage is applied, they'll experience a break. Breaks can stack and will cause subsequent damage for a short time to be increased. So there's a reward for class and party optimization. Breaks can stack up to 4 total, but specifically at 2 breaks or higher, a party member's ultimate can be used to provide a party-wide buff and a powerful ability, usually in the form of an attack. I really only ever saw Emo's and Estina's special because, as I said, they rarely left the party. More specifically because Emo's ultimate is a party-wide full heal and also buffs defenses, and I like to play the glass cannons underleveled because I'm stupid! Beauty without budget. ND or AA, it's pretty and impressive. There's a retro-esque feeling present in Harvestella, almost like a PSX, PS2, PSP vibe. It shares similarities in look, feel, and structure as the weird, obscure, and budgeted JRPGs of the PlayStation era of old. The feeling is further contributed to because of the apparent limitations in budget. The budget was obviously not infinite. It's obvious its inspiration will outshine it in budget alone. Harvestella has a AA feel that I wasn't expecting. There's very little voice acting, the graphics overall are beautiful but undeniably restrained, but it all works in the game's favor. There's a cozier atmosphere in the title built on older game ideology, and if anything, the constraints amplify the experience. The combat is paired with dungeons, representing retro gimmicks and new ideas. I distinctly recall being upset when a late game dungeon pulled the teleport mechanic out of its ass, because we were so close to not seeing what was plainly overdone. Like, no dungeon is wildly out there, they all involve straightforward ideas, but some are still fairly unique. Instead, they opt for a cohesive nature with visual and audio and environmental design. I mean, damn it, they're the best feature of the game aside from the main plot. The Siren Dungeon is a fantastic example with, too many examples to only offer one. The light bleeding through the ocean, on level like light piercing the treetops in a jungle. The coral abundantly coloring the blue vista. The architecture of a mysterious but peaceful race in an almost creek-like vibe. And the music. Bless, the siren music fucks so hard. Somber chorus will put me on my knees in prayer and maybe more. It's simply one of the most attractive areas in the game and has plenty of competitive siblings. It's made powerful because of the somber and mysterious plot surrounding it. The water aesthetic tying into water launching pads displayed as fountains Such a smart environmental choice, and it's wildly compelling and captivating third dungeon because of this cohesion and potent design. And the music is so melancholic, it sets the tone up for the revelation, the boss fight, all of it, before any big reveal. It's just really good. It's further supported by the crazy amount of characters, their personal stories, and dilemmas. Each community and little town has its own architecture and inhabitants. They have different clothing per region and distinguish themselves in some manners, no matter how small. This is paired with the simple stroke applied to character faces, reminiscent of Bravely Default's characters, which were made by legendary Akihiko Yoshida, my beloved, who's made plenty of other more prominent work, but that was what came to mind first. I've touched on the inhabitants of this world and on class designs, which are also visually stunning, both on their owner and on the player's parody, but I've yet to mention the gorgeous portraits. If I said I bought the game primarily because of the character portraits and the idea of romancing these pixels, well, I mean, can you blame me? In the same stroke as with the minimalistic but elegant faces, the portraits and their use of shading, and specifically with their line art, personify Akihiko Yoshida, who again, is my beloved. It's instantly appealing because it's familiar, nostalgic, but most of all, fucking pleasing to admire. All that associative-inspired crap aside, these characters look stunning. They're captivating, expressive, and detailed. Each and every portraited character sells their visual look and identity with equal and immense beauty and grace. To the game's character artist, according to Google, Yasushi Hasegawa, sorry for the mispronunciation, phenomenal work. I'm genuinely impressed, and you made the game especially beautiful. But moving on, I also mentioned how the dungeons handle light and color. And to put it gracefully, they do a shit ton more with it, and it absolutely fucks. Specifically, the transition to night with the arrival of immense bioluminescence had me stunned. The association areas in my brain fired off and brought me back to Xenoblade Chronicles Cross's Noctilum, and its deadly sense of life at night. But the apparent saturation is everywhere, perfectly contrasting western grays at every turn. I hardly want to call it a modernist or 360 approach, because both are true, and to see a game full of color of life, and using grays and reds specifically to paint a dead world is just perfecto. The music is composed by Masaru, oh, I'm gonna mispronounce this awfully, Masaru Shina, or Go Shina professionally, known for composing for titles like the Tales, Code Vein, and God Eater game, as well as plenty of other games in anime I don't follow all that closely. But he's notable for his mastery of multiple genres, dramatic melodies, and creative implementations of instruments into more traditional orchestras. Notably, Harvestella has weighty music to drive a strong sense of emotion. A track distinctly can feel relaxing, curious, or somber. They each have a strong identity and add plenty to every area and event. The highlight of the OST, however, has to be the choir and vocals. Whether in a boss fight, beneath the sea, or during a heartfelt moment, the dramatic expression Ghost Shina is known for is perfectly captured by vocal tracks, putting his prowess on full display. Humanity. Does humanity deserve to exist? Introduction. To my ego, do not be afraid. I usually like to contain the contents of a video subject matter relevant to the game and precisely my feelings, but context is a necessity in this instance. Call it cringy, overdone, or plain old lame, but it's been a rough past few years, this one not excluding. I'm a fan of privacy as much as honesty, so it's been challenging to come forward with this outside of little references or nods. But there's a time and place for truth, and fuck it, there's no way to maintain the integrity of what I want to say without said context. At the time of writing this, I was in a foreign country helping my nation's military do whatever the fuck they deem necessary to maintain the oil market and stability in the area. Not everyone's going to jive with that, and that's understandable. But remember, I did this for my own personal reasons, and I'll go on record and say none of those align with the end goals of any hyper-nationalistic or imperialist mantra our nation's government so desperately likes to mask. We support a regime in several countries that have indentured servitude, countries that treat others like dirt, where hate is fresh in the hearts of its citizens, and while not degrade any citizen to the standard of their society, it is difficult to accept that such a culture exists at all, and worse, is endorsed by the good old USA. I get to hear old war stories about the Yugoslavian War, the basis for Matsuno's work on Tactics Ogre. Truth is, the realities of war are much worse in dialogues from eyewitnesses than any dramatization performed by even my favorite writers. Consistently, I came face to face with the harsh reminders of mankind. There's a pertinent sense of self-destruction. Take Tuluk again, a game where people who are visually indiscernible are killing each other over differences built on state markers and an ancestry of aggression that predates them all. They're no different, yet they fight tooth and nail to wipe each other out. And to what end? Beyond the hate and war, there's the sin of greed and gluttony, maiming our planet to the point it finally retaliates and expels us. We live in a world where the destructive sins of man reign free, and goodness feels overshadowed by such cruel, unforgiving nature. Or at least, it did feel that way for a good minute. That's the premise of my mind, the context of my nature, the prelude to my love for Harvestella. How many games sell their utopia? How many games fail to save my dread? That is my introduction, my hype man performance, if you will, for Harvestella Humanity Again. Chapter 1. Your New World. The initial structure establishes the plot and introduces several characters, settings, and game mechanics before ever giving us freedom. There's a stark opening. The protagonist is lying on the ground. A mythical creature greets them with words of warning and wonder. The environment is gray and bleak, and only the melancholic, oversaturated red illuminates the sky, with its falling ash decorating the scene. Life as we know it is out of sight, unveiled behind dialogue that each and everyone is hiding from the toxic air of quietus. Its intentions are made immediately clear with dialogue from the mysterious girl. It's your world, your decision, and it will fill whatever mold you ask of it. Paraphrasing, of course. But it's made apparent this journey is for the player by the player. Alongside that promise is the desolate world we inhabit, painting a confusing atmosphere that implies we will inherit a dead star. It's a bold and unnerving start to what otherwise is a chill, laid-back opening. The beginning of the game is pervaded by tutorials, introductions, and exposition. Here we are, who we are, what we're up to kind of openings. The game gives the player time to adjust, settle, and inevitably relax in a fantastical setting, but only after unnerving them. From there, we meet the primary culprits of plot movement, Arya and the Omens. Arya, being a time-traveling science fiction lass and roommate to our protagonist, perhaps a budding, canonically endorsed life partner, but sensically the leading proponent for pushing the mystery surrounding her and her other driver, or drivers per se, the Omens, the mechanical alien race that's the catalyst and proprietaries of the apocalypse. It's a reasonably strong start, followed by a lull in the story where the player is permitted to explore and discover the rest of the cast and their unique dilemmas. It's honestly a weak point for the plot, but the world building and general sense of community really serve the game well in establishing the world and that desire to protect it. So it's slower, a little less focused in the moment, but intentional and arguably required to prepare for the grander plot ahead. I found it fun, mostly because Harvestella's world is captivating, the culture present is intriguing, and all of the characters, no matter how minor or major, have grounded and very human stories to explore. One of the major points looking back was the central themes surrounding individual and even mundane struggles. Everyone has something going on, and the player is a beautiful answer to every plight. Even when the player doesn't explicitly fix the problem, there's a general MO that their presence is enough to make miracles happen. It creates a world where, yeah, the world's dying and my life's in shambles, but there's always hope. There's always a chance for the impossible to be made possible by our effort and cooperation. There's a clear theme in Harvestella pointing to, if we all pitched in, worked together and acted out of kindness, the world we made a better place by our will and hearts alone. And it fucks good for it. Chapter 2. Creeping Revelations. But once the initial locals and characters are revealed, once the side quests start drying up, the game moves forward into more severe and focused territory. Harvestella intriguingly presents many questions and very few answers with its primary narrative. Its presentation and habits lead to a mysterious aura permeating the whole of the game. To start, it introduced many of the puzzle pieces, but refuses to compile them, sometimes even partly, so the core of the plot feels like creeping revelations are stirring from the cracks and reaching for the light of day. Once the party is compiled and all the arcs and secrets begin to blend, a central antagonist is brought to light, and paints a clear picture of crystalline heroes standing against the Dark Lord in a final bout. It satisfies Square's staple plot while manipulating it into a promising twist. Red herrings are hinted at, truths are slowly revealed, and the perceived final boss is defeated, yet the story drones on. I seriously thought the game might end by the 20-hour mark and be just another fun but rather simple experience. And boy was I wrong, as the best is, thankfully, still to come. And at this point, I'll point to the screen illustrating clearly that it's spoiler time and the duration of this period, so do what you will, or must. And with that, I'll continue. Up until this point, there's been equal examples of both harmless and downright villainous omens. There's a budding sense that the Seas Lights aren't what they appear. In fact, Arya claims they look like the devices that reaped her home. So when Baddie Geist is name-dropped a few dozen times, it's made apparent who the villain is, except before we can ever pursue him, he comes to us, and kidnaps Arya, claiming her importance and wishing for her cooperation. I'll also note that Baddie Geist was autocorrected to Daddy Geist, and I'm calling my autocorrect out for being down horrendous. But I do kind of understand, you know, I mean, look at that character design. I love this robot. After Arya is captured, the early game companion, Thesis, decides to reveal the truth and help us out. They illuminate that there is no kingdom, no royalty, and simply the human imagination at work. And that the castle everyone believed was inhabited by royals is actually a space elevator and HQ for the Omens. It's revealed the Omen are super AI babysitting mankind because mankind relinquished their governance to the superior AI, because our ancestors recognized our own self-destructive nature and thought this was the best idea. Granted, Ben agrees with them, but he also isn't the best example for an advanced human society, or maybe that's the point. Slowly, as the party progresses through the Castle of Illusion, fighting off Geistgoons, more information is revealed by Dianthus, until finally the world is mostly unraveled as to be created and maintained by the Omens, including the Seas Lights, and that Geist will use their power to destroy mankind. There's essentially a revelation that Geist realized man will continue to war, pillage stars, and repeat the cycle of their self-destruction, and through a broken logic sequence, he justified that it would be better for man to have never existed at all, to go out in a bang, if you will. I'll say that the Achieve the Void antagonist never really did it for me because their reasoning was always built upon insanity and madness, or just plain old shallow thinking. But a robot breaking down and losing faith in humanity because of his own hyper-intellect and paranoia surrounding an unsolvable problem made by man is mad cool and compelling. Basically, the Omens can't solve why the planet is dying and fix Quietus, and Geist was especially driven to the point of losing it, breaking down so to speak because of it. So using all of the Seas Lights, Geist starts a self-destruct sequence on the star and uses the residue energy of the world to empower himself and don that Dark Lord title as he challenges the protagonists, our heroes, to a final bout on the dying star. It's a proper epic conclusion, were it the conclusion. Chapter 3. The Other Side of Humanity. From here, it unravels the existing ideas, like time travel. It's a hoax. Thankfully, it's a genre I rarely like nowadays. Pulp time travel is fun when it's conscientious, and the best of shows and movies pull off the more serious of the genre, but most of the time it feels full of contradictions, plot holes, and nonsense. So for the story to begin unraveling that is a strong showing. It fully transitions into the science fiction, committing to the ideas presented beforehand. The time machine Arya arrived in is discovered to instead be a spaceship, and the gang explores the somber, empty world of Earth, our Earth, made desolate by the Red Queen, the Earth's sea slight. This is honestly my most and least favorite part of the story, because on one hand, the themes are fully realized and revealed, have all their context and support, and are being tackled by the strength of a 300-pound, 6-foot linebacker full of nothing but pre-workout and rage. It fucks good. But it does weaken the mystery aspect. At a certain point, it's less about the mystery and does shift to plot hole filler vibe. The authenticity of it is all a bit worse, but that's comparative to one of the most memorable and impactful games I played all year. It's one of those odd feelings where my love of conclusions of the finite comes to a full stop when met with a world and a message surrounding positivity and hope. One I wish I could play on loop forever like a song, if only to maintain that feeling. And I can, but the loop is a good 40 hours each runtime, so you can see my dilemma. So, big reveal, we're on the moon. It's actually spoiled by Hein's character arc with the flag beneath the ocean, which honestly makes it cooler in how they support and even allude to the idea before its big reveal. The Earth is a desolate and empty place because humanity won't stop playing its own dirge of self-destruction, with all the war, greed, and evil they produce. So to preserve human life, the Omens took the Earth's gene seed, a bit high concept I know, and plugged it into the moon so that life on Earth could be born on the moon anew. So the moon became Earth too, including its own set of humans. Notice the Cain and Abel references, alluding to the two different species of humanity, the creators and the creations. Furthermore, the allusions with Eden as well, just some surface level biblical stuff, but I ate it up all the same. The reality is, Earth is gone. The moon is fading similarly as Quietus is a symptom of the star rotting, and the Omens, with all their intelligence and time, are unable to stop its dreadful march. For all the hope presented early on in each and every story, the current mood is bleak, apocalyptic in a literal sense. It's a wonderful culmination of preparation and actualization of hope against the inevitable. Call it fate versus man. Every questline starts out with a feeling of impossibility. Is it really possible for an Omen girl and a gamer guy to be in a relationship? But by the end of it, through hope, effort, and a dream, the world seemingly moves mountains in response to strong emotions. It's all built upon a wonderful framework of questions leading to more questions and building up till the sum of the answers and questions alike craft the world we now inhabit. The sum of it, do we deserve to exist? And to draw on my own perspective, to let out a little of the nihilistic goblin within, we are a race of unimaginable cruelty. We take the most earnest of ideas and corrupt. Religion, government, and whatever are all fundamentally ideas that could be used for good, but humanity corrupts good ideas as much as intentions. For a quarter, we may not doom our descendants, but for millions, I'd sacrifice it all. Hyperbole, of course. True psychopaths don't think about these things, right? But it goes to show, especially given the recent world climate, with war and politics alike, outlining the shadow of our doom, but thankfully not coloring it in. Yet, the darkness does not cover us, the light fills the outline. To summarize what I thought, and to quote my notes, the motherfucking indomitable human spirit versus the inevitable self-destructive nature of man fight in the ring, and oh god, the indomitable human spirit has the steel chair. With that line I was oh so desperate to say, and the nihilist goblin crap behind me, let's talk about hope and humanity. The story uses a world steeped in dread and the presented inevitable demise of humanity to then force hope down the player's throat, to speak both to the indomitable spirit, but also to making happiness in spite of persistent dread. The side quests throughout display communities striving to carve their own bubble of joy and purpose in the dying world. There's but one solution to it all, to make a new Eden, a haven from Quietus. It's a bit unexplained and suspends the disbelief a bit too far, but the idea is that sea slights can be burnt out early to create a safe space of life. There's enough space inside the haven for all of the ables, but there are also the Cains. The Cains are the expiring earthlings stored in hydrostasis, and quickly running out of time. So there's an impossible question. Who deserves to live, creator or creation? It presses on to ask Arya, the Harbinger, who is a Cain who has lived with ables, to decide who lives and who dies. Burdened by her parents and friends' sacrifice on the previous Eden, by their aspirations and failures, she chooses her kind against ours. There's a solid, hey, snap out of it Arya scene, and in general some really good drama. It ends with the Omens transferring authority to the player as their victory deems them more worthy than Arya. There's an impossible decision forced on the player. Which humankind deserves Eden? To sum it all up, both options are bad ends. Typically denying these options unlocks a secret third thing, but in my experience these two initial choices are almost always integral to the themes of the game, and opting for a good ending in a dark and bleak world subverts the writing in the worst way. But Harvestella has been building this conflict for literally dozens of hours, and to subvert this, to lean into hope in face of the impossibility, is the point, and it asks the player, do you get it? In a coy but acceptable manner. Just say no. Deny the impossibility. Condemn both races and lead all to a better future. Hope is a fleeting thing, but sometimes it's all we have, and Harvestella calls all to grasp it when it's needed most. It's pretty fucking awesome. This transitions into a very last-minute exposition slog before one last dungeon and two last boss fights. There's also some stellar cutscenes here and a real man versus god vibe permeating every moment. The mystery girl from the beginning is the soul of Regaia, and Quietus is caused by the soul of Gaia, or Earth, who is now on Regaia trying to accomplish their desires. Effectively, Gaia is a synthetic being made from the gene seed of Earth to grant man any wish, and basically pulled a Persona 4 and claimed man would rather die than slowly perish over time. It's good enough and serves to cover up the last questions the audience has mostly. I mostly excuse it for having an incredible final boss fight that feels better designed than Elden Ring, so take that game of the year. But in all honesty, it's a solid conclusion to a game about holding on to hope and finding the best outcome despite the difficulties of life. It's nothing wild or out there, it's not trying to define humanity beyond simply justifying it. And during a time I was truly losing hope, when the cynic was winning, where I turned the key on the survival train and trudged along its tracks, Harvestella managed to make me believe that everything would work out. I just had to keep moving and trust in humanity. You know, it's ironic, because that final fight hardly encompasses what I feel so much as all the little side quests and their mundane problems and that constant motif of a happy ending achieve. It was the right story for the right time, and I'm grateful for that. Not to mention all of the character stories reflecting on purpose, self-discovery, and further embodying how being human and having hope are synonymous. But I'll leave that for y'all's discovery. The script is honestly long enough as is, and with everything I've left out of the plot alongside all that's only being visually conveyed from the cast, there's plenty to go and see for yourself. And for my sake, let's leave it at that. This isn't a stop shop, but a celebration and commemoration for what's honestly mentally medicinal. Happy ever after. Harvest these balls in your Stella, the first draft's title. So yeah, in summary, it was incredibly memorable and valuable. There's more to do, of course, between romance and a post-game dungeon, as well as all the 100% completionist urges bubbling up from deep within me. I'm considering going for it, but other games deserve my time and their recognition. All in all, it was a AA title given the freedom to say something relatively simple, even obvious, in a performative and stellar manner. Hope is often a blunt theme, but in the face of destroying our world, a concept that is pressing outside the fiction, it's breathtaking. Justifying mankind, all while acknowledging its evil, is no small feat. It is a call to action, for each individual to be better as one or as a collective act, to improve and repair, no matter the impossibilities. Our purpose is to be better than our nature, to dream and hope for a world worthy of our ideals. and build it ourselves with all the blood, sweat, and tears we can muster. And while the narrative goes off, the mechanics and intricacies of the game hold their own and amplify the beauty present. The beauty of us. It isn't concerned with padding, wasting time, or unnecessary add-ons, and instead try something new and fun with the A to J RPG market. So despite it all, the past few years, that ever-present feeling of finity, I'm alive. I'll answer the call and do what I can where I can. When tested and pressed, I'll not stand idly by. I won't just be human, but continue aiming for that hero status, to be more than my species. If we all try, maybe we'll get there together, as a collective, because that's ultimately where I lacked hope, and where I now see it, and the sum of us and our potential. We touch the stars, plunge beneath the seas, and evolve so much. We're capable of so much more than any credit we offer, and it's about time I recognize that. Harvestella, you are an independent sea of thoughts. I hardly did justice, but I'm happy to have had you, if only briefly on the show, and I can't wait to keep playing. Thank you, all of you. I hate getting emotional, man. Anyway, that was Harvestella. I recorded that. I played it last November, December of 2022, and I'm recording it all now at 2023. I am no longer in the desert, and I'm doing a lot better. But it is important to remember where I was at that time and what I felt at that time, because to forget that call to action is to do a disservice not just to the art, but to us as a people. And yeah, I hope I didn't get too emotional, too creative, too out there, too wild, too whatever. But I really had fun recording this. I really had fun making this. And I really hope it hits the hour mark. I actually have no idea. I'm just recording and editing and suffering. But yeah, thanks for being with the journey so far. It's been a wild year, and this was kind of like the conclusion that never came out because it was just a little too big for a snowball on a laptop. But now I've got the setup and I've got the dream. So yeah, here's to the next game that completely breaks me down and builds me up. It'll be a while, but I hope it won't. Take care, y'all.